I always believed that science fiction movies, because science fiction movies, other than, I suppose, Blade Runner, were always, in a galaxy far, far away. And then you hear the orchestra, you hear the European orchestral sound, and you go, really? In the future, we're still going to be doing this? Why can't we believe in that instruments, that there will be new instruments, there will be new sonic textures? Why can't we go and invent new things that don't remind us in a peculiar way of the past? And so, rather than doing an orchestral score, ultimately what we did was we made a score of a band of virtuosos. A small group of the people who were the best in the world at what they do. The other thing which I really do like about the band is that everybody brings a little bit of their culture to it. And because now it's a mishmash of culture, so then when you write something which is futuristic, it is like, that's what happened, that the cultures all got muddled up a little bit. So it actually helps in the expressiveness of the music.
It was this perfect storm of slightly different instruments, slightly different people, slightly different ears and ideas. And they all came together in this weird soundscape, but it works. And Hans' theme works throughout the whole thing for that kind of sound.
But the difference between Dune and any other film I have made is it's not a sequel. It's really a way of diving deeper into the story. It's a very difficult book to make into a movie because most of what happens in the book is internal dialogue. It's in people's heads. When the lights go down and the first note comes and the first image appears, I will open a door that lets you in to feel something, to have an experience. I'm not going to tell you how to feel about things, but I will tell you that it's okay to have an emotion now, that you have an emotional experience.
The secret to a score like Dune is to create a soundscape that's really wide and engulfing, but not out there. It needs to feel very visceral and very human and connected, and at the same time, be like in the sand with the sandworms. It's got to feel like you're there.
Hans wanted really unique sounds. Hans mentioned the Osmose, which I think had come out kind of recently. He had heard about it and met with the guys. We had one or two. We started playing with it, and he said, we need 5 more.
When you play a note on a piano, basically it goes plonk, right? Plonk, and it dies out. What they've done is when you touch the keyboard, it knows you're really touching the keyboard. Like within that travel of that key, the sound can change completely. And then, of course, the one thing every keyboard player wants to do is what a violinist can do or guitars can do is have vibrato. So you can go and wobble your keys left to right. And you literally can transform a sound completely.
Par contre, le fait d'avoir ici des instruments qui permettent de jouer comme un instrument de musique, on va dire, plus traditionnel, ça permet de se rapprocher des choses comme de la voix et pouvoir le jouer. Et par exemple, justement, pouvoir répondre à un besoin d'accompagner une image ou d'autres musiciens. Donc l'avantage de l'explicité, c'est ce côté vraiment très direct, en fait, entre le fait d'avoir le son au bout des doigts et de le manipuler.
En musique de film, c'est vraiment un élément qui est important. On réagit à une image, on réagit à une intention sur le moment. Et ça, on peut le traduire dans le jeu instantanément. S'il fallait aller en programmation, changer son LFO, changer son enveloppe et tout, on crée une distance. On n'est plus dans l'instant de l'émotion et on perd cette spontanéité. Là, la spontanéité, on l'a en permanence au bout des doigts.
Rather than having a piece of technology in your room, you suddenly have another musician in your room that you're having a conversation with. So it lets you have a dialogue.
I came up as a rudimental percussionist, so my improvisation skills weren't particularly phenomenal, but my technique was really good. Programming percussion is sort of a cold experience. I'm trying to get depth. I'm trying to get something to cover up the fact that it's not real. And so when you have something where you can come up with an organic feel right out the gate, it's quite rare. You have the ability to feel it differently, and that is quite cool. If you hit it quietly, you can instantly emotionally feel a difference. You can be creative in a way with things like the pitch bend or the key bend, the actual pitch bend, the ratchet effect. You can just go to town. You know, like, and also, if you're programming a drum on a normal keyboard, you don't get the same response as you do on this.
For us, it was an obvious thing, once it existed, that yes, you built an instrument for Dune, so we should take advantage of that. The film was made to highlight your instrument. You guys spent an enormous amount of time building exactly the instruments that should have been built 100 years ago. It let us play the music of an imaginary future, and that was important to us. It is what we needed in the band,
Pretty good. And we were weird. So now I want to go take everything that they're doing and just, go wider, go weirder.
It gives new kind of sounds that you never heard before. And that's great. When you hear it, you don't know if it's going from the future, that you don't know exactly what kind of instrument is it.
With all this technology, I wanted to still create something which was an immensely human score. I mean, there are a lot of female voices in it because part of the story is the Bene Gesserit, and both Denis and I feel very strongly that the feminine is the strength of the story, the strength of the characters. I love doing things which you can't quite do in nature. So there was a lot of emphasis on, what could we do with voices? What could we do with resynthesizing things? Because the more abstract we went, we always needed to somehow find our way back to humanity.
Hans had an idea for this very long vocal part that would just continue throughout a few scenes, and it would constantly be evolving. So in order to achieve that, you could have somebody not be able to breathe for minutes, which is not very practical, or you can use resynthesization techniques. You can play with it in a way that you wouldn't normally do it. For example, if you wanted to take Loire's sound, but you wanted to go really low, up 3 octaves over the course of, 4 minutes, that's something that you can do with something like this. And it was very fun to play with that and experiment with it.
It was this idea that within one note, so much can happen, and that's what this does suddenly.
Donc là, on a un son qui est un son qui a été envoyé par Molly. Donc elle nous a envoyé une dizaine de sons à des hauteurs différentes avec des rythmes différents. Donc on a écouté un peu tout ça. On en a sélectionné un là, donc on peut entendre l'original du son. Voilà, donc on a cette matière sonore. Donc on en fait une analyse et ça on va pouvoir le rejouer et donc on va retrouver un peu le timbre de la voix, mais là, on va entendre que le timbre de la voix il est plus haut. Le timbre, c'est un timbre plus enfantin, donc on a modifié le timbre de la voix et je peux en jouer toutes les notes. Et je peux le faire sur l'Osmose, éventuellement en grave. Ça, c'est vraiment quelque chose que vous allez entendre avec ces notes-là dans le film. Voilà, donc on l'a sous les doigts, j'ai le volume de la voix, la vitesse à laquelle le flow des beats, la couleur du timbre, plus ou moins enfantin, plus ou moins adulte, pour créer une tension ou accompagner quelque chose. Et puis derrière, on finissait dans des enceintes. Et ça contribue complètement à la perception finale du son qu'on va avoir, de pas rendre le son sur des enceintes, mais de le rendre sur des résonateurs. Ça veut dire aussi, c'est comme un instrument acoustique, c'est quand on veut enregistrer ça, il faut des micros. Donc comme pour un piano, comme pour un violon, comme pour une guitare. Donc il y a un parc de micros qui avait été installé par Alan Meyerson, excusez du peu, ça se retrouve à avoir Alan Meyerson qui vient installer les micros pour soi. Et qui nous a installé un parc de micros tout à fait complètement exceptionnel, placé avec soin, pour capter ce son issu du bois, issu des résonateurs, même si généré au départ par de l'électronique.
They have a speaker on the inside and the whole body of it resonates as it goes. So they're a little bit more dead, and so they can be a little bit more, they'll have a specific sound that will work for some things and others. These will be adding kind of more tone and texture to it, depending on what goes in there. That's why it's so interesting to try different things to put into it to see what it's going to create. That's what's fun about it. If you put percussion into it, you're going to get something completely different than putting a guitar into it or a vocal into it. My idea at first was let's spread them out and just think of it as a singular image. And then if you send it to one of them, you'll have panning, you'll have things moving. So if I send it to this gong, it's going to be on the left. If I send it to this gong, it's going to be on the right. When we did that, it really worked well. And we had the two gongs next to each other. Then I'm like, well, why don't we put the metallics on the outside and the non-metallics on the inside? So we just created an image, in the room.
So here's a sound called ebosin. This is the dry sound. If I play, and I wobble it around a bit to give it more of an analog kind of feel maybe, or just more live. Sounds very nice. But if we put it through only the gong resonator, you'll have a different reaction to it. All these frequencies are playing and rubbing against each other. If you have the dry signal, a gong resonator and a piano resonator, for example, you have 3 different layers that you can blend. And over time, if you have to hold a chord, you can change the chord by blending between the 3, or whatever, Here's the Dune chord.
We've done 2 Dune movies, and it's been, 5 years or something like that. So we've given 5 years of our life to it, and we only have one life to give. So the things that we do are important, and the things and the tools that we use are important, and the people we surround ourselves with are incredibly important. We spend more time with the musicians and our co-workers than we spend with our family, which I know is not supposed to be the way we're doing things, but that's the way we're doing it. So these tools are of enormous importance because they are, part of our life as opposed to just part of creating something. I think this is an important instrument. It's an important step forward in what can become, the history of 21st century music. And while nations are fighting and while politicians are useless and The Bachelor and television programs like that are ruining any culture that we might still have left, you guys go and build something that can actually create beauty and rage and emotion and all sorts of things that amplify who we are at our best. I think the world is becoming harder and crueler and everything, and I feel proud that I have a job as a storyteller, and I think music is a very important language and is a very important part of showing what is best in humanity.